And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. Now, we are talking about what happened yesterday, where Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison for sexually assaulting 2 women. It is a verdict that has captured the nation by storm. I got to tell you, if it wasn't for coronavirus, if it wasn't for the election, this probably would have been the biggest story in the news. A lot of reaction, a lot of perspective from this sentence. We want to start right now with Donna Rotuno, one of Weinstein's attorneys. She had this to say about the sentence from yesterday.
Good morning. That sentence that was just handed down by this court was obscene. That number was obnoxious. There are murderers who will get out of court faster than Harvey Weinstein will. That number spoke to the pressure of movements and the public. That number did not speak to the evidence that came out at trial. That number did not speak to the testimony that we heard. That number did not speak to evidence, nor did it speak to justice. I am overcome with anger at that number. I think that number is a cowardly number to give. I think the judge caved, just as I believe the jury caved, and I am not happy.
What does this sentence represent for you? What does it represent for you?
Total unfairness and a complete lack of acknowledgement of what the facts and evidence of this case actually showed. I think the judge took things into consideration that never should have been taken into consideration, especially when we know in a prior case recently, the judge gave someone in a much worse circumstance 7.5 years.
So he said he felt remorse for the situation.
Anybody else?
Harvey
Harvey feels, it's a terrible, of course it's too harsh, it's ridiculous. Harvey feels terrible, of course he does. This is not an easy day. We hope that this sentence will speak to the appellate court in a way that will show that this has been unfair from the very beginning, and here's just one more thing that we can add to the list of things that did not show a fair, just, and impartial trial.
Does he think he's a victim? Does he think he's a victim?
What's the next step?
Well, yeah, sure. The appellate court will be able to review this once the appeal is filed. Obviously, that can't happen until now this portion of the case is done, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so let's break it down right now. Joining me once again is Harvey Weinstein's publicist, Juda Engelmayer. He's with us again. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for having me here.
So what was Mr. Weinstein's immediate reaction, if you know, to this 23-year sentence?
Well, I think that people saw him in the courtroom. I think he was devastated. I think he was shocked at it, extremely sad and afraid.
Was this expected?
Not necessarily. I mean, you and I had discussed it, and I was giving my guesses on the over/under on the Vegas odds. But for a criminal proceeding with the convictions he was convicted of, first-time offense, no, it wasn't expected.
Do you think the judge, as Ms. Rotuno had said, that he came in that day, before hearing any of the statements, before hearing anything, he knew he was going to go forward with 23?
Jesse, I'll take you back to January 6th, or right around then, when the judge walked into the courtroom and told Harvey he was going to put him away for life for using his phone. I think he had his verdict, he had his sentence already made up back then.
And what do you think he based it on? Because there was an interesting interaction that we heard in court where it seemed at one point Judge Burke sided with the defense and said he wouldn't take into account what the state had mentioned, all these different accounts that happened from the 70s, uncharged conduct, yet in his sentencing, he said this might have been your first conviction, but you're not first offense. What do you make of that?
I make the fact that the Judge Burke was under immense pressure from the prosecutor's office, from movement, from public officials to make sure that Harvey was convicted and sentenced to the fullest extent that he could without even listening to the evidence, because that was what his job was. It wasn't a wheel spin. He was chosen for this trial for that very reason, and he's been treating Harvey and his team that way ever since the trial began. So what I think, like you said, he made one statement, then he did something completely different, because he has to show that he's being objective, but in reality, he had no expectation of being objective at all.
Do you think Judge Burke was influenced by the fact that these 6 women who testified against Weinstein were in that courtroom, front row? We heard from Miriam Haley and Jessica Mann. What did you make of those statements? What do you think Judge Burke made of those statements?
I think, well, Miriam Haley and Jessica Mann had the right to speak, and I think what he made of those statements were emotional and heartfelt, whatever you would expect from an alleged victim of a crime like that. But in terms of the sentencing, he just looked at them and didn't want to disappoint them. That's the wrong type of thing for a judge to do.
What did you speak to Mr. Weinstein about Jessica Mann and Miriam Haley, what they had to say?
I have not had a chance to actually discuss that with him. Only the lawyers were allowed back in afterwards.
Okay, now let's talk about his statement, because we were waiting to hear if Mr. Weinstein was going to say something. There's a bunch of things I want to talk about. There was a part where he said that he feels remorseful, he's trying to learn, and he would do things a lot differently.
Right.
What did he mean by that? Because he didn't offer an apology to these women, but he said he felt remorseful.
So, first of all, that statement was completely his own and something that he's been wanting to say the entire time. If you remember, during the trial, it was a question whether he was testifying or not. What people don't realize, and the jury, one of the jurors who spoke said that the fact that he didn't testify worked against them, although they promised before they became jurors that that wouldn't affect them. That's besides the fact. Harvey had a Sandoval motion in front of him that nobody knew. It was under seal, that we weren't allowed to discuss. That if he were to testify, every bit of bad acts he ever did, and not sexual crimes or anything like that, even yelling at Bob, punching Bob in the face, whatever, everything that came out in those mysterious leaks that came out the day before sentencing would have been brought up, and those people would have been brought to testify in front of the jury as well. So Harvey was told by the judge that if he chose to testify, he opens the Sandoval motion up to everything he's ever done, which would have been worse. So he was actually prohibited, in a sense, from testifying. So when he finally had his opportunity to speak, he wanted to speak. And what he says, he is remorseful for the type of person he was, for the kind of person he was, putting his craft and putting his job and putting his work above people, above family, above everything else, making sure that what he put out was, in his mind, the best thing possible without worrying about the human cost of that. He was a bad person. He was an awful boss in some ways. Did he commit crimes? No. So would he say he's sorry for committing a crime? He wasn't going to do that. Is he sorry that people feel bad the way he treated them? Yes. Is he sorry that he let his family go because of it? Absolutely. But is he sorry for committing a crime? Once again, no, he doesn't believe he did. And you heard him say it to Jessica and to Miriam yesterday. He said, I'm hoping that some part of our relationship is, of the good parts are still remain with you. Because he genuinely believes they had a relationship, genuinely believes it was consensual, and genuinely believes that they liked each other. And to him, this was a surprise.
Yeah, he mentioned his confusion. He had also said that we're living in a society today where he actually compared it to the communist purge. What did he mean by that? What was he trying to get at there?
So what he was trying to say right now is we're in a society right now where due process is no longer as important as correcting historic wrongs, so to speak. So now if we don't like someone, if we feel something is wrong, we don't care what the facts are anymore. Someone's got to be held responsible for it. And that's how he feels that he was treated.
You can understand how people would look at that in as a way it might be an unpopular statement. Do you think what he said to the court hurt him? Do you think it hurt him in his sentencing?
No, and I'll tell you why. I mean, if the judge would have given a little thought and paused for a second before he gave a sentence, then it might have hurt him. In the end, of course, I was listening to it thinking that maybe those weren't the right time for those kind of statements, because you're not you want to try to impress the judge and not upset him. But the judge walked in with that sentence in his mind already, and nothing that was said affected it.
Well, were the attorneys a little concerned with what he was saying? Because I saw there was a moment when Arthur Idella stood up and interrupted Weinstein from continuing on with his statement, and then he continued on.
So if you saw, Arthur was also taking cues from me and from the lawyers, and Harvey wanted to say what he was going to say, and he spoke to lawyers beforehand and prepared and told them what he was going to say. Harvey went a little bit off script on that and decided he wanted to say what he wanted to say, not just what the lawyers wanted him to say. And we were all confused, but then Harvey put his hand on Arthur and said, let me do this, because that's who Harvey is. He wants to get this out. And when I said it earlier, a few weeks ago, that he wanted to testify, he did want to testify. He absolutely wanted to say something at trial, but because of the Sandoval, he couldn't.
Okay, so let's talk about where he is.
Right.
Where is Harvey Weinstein at this moment?
Currently, he's in Bellevue Hospital, prison ward.
And
he had a mild, allegedly, and I don't know the facts of it, but he went back to Rikers from court yesterday. He experienced some heart difficulty, and the medics there decided that he had to go back to the hospital. And I've heard different reports that he had a mild heart attack last night. I don't have that. I haven't had a chance to speak to him yet. The lawyers are speaking to him this morning. I will have those answers shortly.
So in the other words, he's there, and there's no idea or game plan about when he would be transferred to Fishkill, right? Isn't that the next step?
The way the process works is, if, barring the medical issue, he would go back to Rikers Island, which he did, and 3 to 7 days later, he gets transferred to Fishkill, which is a processing center for all prisoners, and then from there, he gets assigned to his final place.
Which is one of the upstate.
It could be Fishkill. It could be another one of the upstate prisons.
And we've heard reports that he has a prison consultant. Has he been preparing for being in upstate prison?
Craig has been preparing him for being in upstate prison to the best he can, telling him what to expect, but not just helping him emotionally prepare, but also helping him navigate and making the request of DOC as necessary as well.
And what about LA? Because we've been waiting to hear what's going to happen with LA. As the latest I've heard is that the LA prosecutors are working with New York on extraditing him. What have you heard?
We heard the same thing. I got the same phone calls from media telling me that there's a call to extradite him to LA. We don't know yet. We're looking at that. Our lawyers will do what we think we have to do on that. But in theory, he will go be arraigned in an LA court and then come back to serve a sentence here in New York. And then once the trial is ready to begin in LA, they will send him back to LA for the trial.
Final question in terms of LA. Now that this case is concluded, are Donna, Damon, and Arthur all staying on board for both the appeal and LA?
So for the appeal, yes. For the LA portion, it's not clear who the attorneys are going to be for that yet. I'm not at liberty to discuss what team is being put together right now, and we don't know what the final team is.
Well, Judah, I appreciate you coming on
and
explaining what you can explain and tell us what you thought. It's been a remarkable case to cover, and hopefully as we learn more with the latest developments, you'd love to come back on and talk to us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll have more.